Namaskar. Brahma Sat Jagat Mithya. These words are very, very core to the entire tradition that we come from. However, what is very important to remember, I will come to what it exactly means. I know many of you who do not understand Sanskrit or are not familiar with Indian languages are already probably feeling a little confused, but let me come to it. But before I do that, let me tell you that this particular term or these words, Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, are words that have permeated our culture, our tradition, our religion for years and years and years, and have been the source of utter confusion. And hence at the KarmYogis for 21st Century's Fit for Life program, which is all about teaching and learning, all about developing, designing a daily practice routine with which we can keep sharpening ourselves, keep sharpening our own operating system, the operating system of our life. As we do that, it is critical that we pay attention to the confusion that has emerged around these shlokas of aphorisms or sayings. And these are really like eternal sayings and very important essence of the entire Shastra. Shastra means all the scriptures that permeate through our culture, through our traditions. Let me get back to the term itself. Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. Brahma is actually the essence of whatever we can call God or Ishwar or Allah. In different religions, different culture, it's referred to in different ways. There is a slight difference. Brahma, however, is much more in concrete terms. It is something that can be experienced because it's connected with consciousness. Now, we in KarmYogis for 21st Century, in our Fit for Life program, always talk about Tan Pran Man Chitta. We say there's the physical, the energetic, the mental, and the spiritual dimensions of our being. And these dimensions are what we are trying to sharpen, we are trying to polish, we are trying to enlighten. Now, the Chitta dimension, which is the most spiritual dimension, is not contrary to or is not antithesis or against the material dimension. We have constantly said this, that these are two dimensions. That is why we don't call them two different competing aspects or competing sides. These are just two dimensions. Just like if you have a coin, as I mentioned this earlier, if you have a coin, the heads and the tails are two different sides of the same coin, two different dimensions, two different angles. So in the same way, the material and the spiritual dimensions. So Jagat, when we say in this term, Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, Jagat refers to the material dimensions. Jagat really means the whole world, the whole universe. That's the kind of translation for Jagat. Brahma, on the other sense, on the other side, is talking about the spiritual dimension. Now, as we know, the Manaschitta or mental, spiritual, psycho-spiritual aspects kind of move us from the gross Jagat, universal, material aspects of the world towards the more spiritual dimensions of the world. Now, the aphorism or the shloka is saying, Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. Satya is truth and Mithya is untrue, false. And hence it would seem that what is being said here is that all that is spiritual is true, is real, whereas all that is material is untrue or unreal. Mithya here means unreal. It's not really false or untrue or lies. There's a difference between lie. Mithya could be a lie, not the truth or not reality. So here, the way the word mithya and satya is being referred to, is being talked about, is to talk about or is to mean what is real and what is not real. And it is being said that Jagat Mithya Brahma Satya, or Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, which means the spiritual aspects are real, whereas the material aspect is unreal. Now obviously, if we keep it at this, there would be a lot of debate. This would leave room for a lot of debate. Now, Adi Shankaracharya, who was really a thought leader and the master who kind of propagated this term or this aphorism, didn't really stop here. Now, the point is that because the Indian Shastras or the scriptures are so multifaceted, there are so many different various books and commentaries on books, etc. There's the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita, and the epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and then there's so many different commentaries on all of these that have been written by different thought leaders. So it's really a veritable treasure house of wisdom and knowledge, all trying to kind of document the process of seeking reality and seeking truth, seeking God, seeking the ultimate reality, etc. It's just the scriptures are a documentation, and it's not static. It's a dynamic documentation across time. Now, before they became scriptures, before they were printed, as I mentioned earlier, these were word of mouth. The tradition was word of mouth transmission because printing was not there. That was called the Shruti tradition. Shruti means you heard something from wise people, thought leaders, from your guru, and you would transmit it. So the tradition was that of Shruti, from where the mantras, etc. came, the shlokas, which means that whatever was being said was not set in prose, but set in some kind of meter, some kind of poetic meter. So it became easy for people to transmit it verbatim to others, to remember. That's the source of the mantras. Now, one of the kind of defining mantras is this, Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. Often it has been called to be, it has been assumed that that's really the essence of all the scriptures. Now, the parts of this would be mentioned in different places. There are some places, some Upanishads, some places where only this part is mentioned, and then it flows into other kind of shlokas, other scriptures. But Adi Shankaracharya, who really brought this forth and talked about it as and made this popular, didn't stop here. He had a concluding line to it, which is often missed out, not talked about, or misrepresented. And it's very important to conclude with that third line, because the third or the concluding line puts this whole thing into context and perspective, which is really also becomes the basis for KarmYoga for 21st century and our Fit for Life program. What is the concluding line? Well, Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. The world is false. Brahman alone, or consciousness alone, or God alone, or spirituality alone is real. So material is unreal. Spirit is real. Then the concluding line is Jivo Brahmaeva na paraha. So Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, Jivo Brahmaeva na paraha. What does this Jivo Brahmaeva na paraha mean? What does this represent? Well, Jiva means life. Now life is all about material, as you can see. Jiva. Jiva as in the material dimension of which includes life. Because life itself, we see the entire biosphere, if we can call it life, if we can call life the biosphere, which means all these plants, the animals, we humans, and everything else. Because the plants and if you see the whole cycle, it really, even the stuff that we say is not full of life. So earth and mud and sunlight and all that is what life is made up of. Where would life be without water, without sunlight, without the earth? without fire, without, all those basic elements that we find in nature. So life here really, when we say jiva, it is talking about nature. Nature as in the nature that we see, the material nature that we see. So it says jiva brahmaiva na paraha. Jiva brahmaiva. So this brahmaiva, what we were saying, was the only thing that was real, and this material universe which is unreal is now being equated. It's being said jiva brahmaiva. Jiva is, aiva means is. So this jiva, life, is Brahma. So Brahma here does not refer to Brahma, another idealized God form. That is not what is being talked about. When the term Brahma is used here, the word Brahma really represents pure consciousness in its entirety. The Purna consciousness, Purna Chitta. Purna means entire, totality, complete, integrated. So the consciousness of all, total consciousness. Now we, as in when we get this life, each life kind of captures a little bit of consciousness, and that consciousness is the most spiritual dimension of each of our individual being, which is also sometimes referred to as Atma. Atma and Brahma. The difference is, this is for the individual, representing that aspect of the individual, and Brahman represents the most spiritual aspect of the collective, of the total collective. If we can talk about all life that has ever been, and all life that will ever be, all of that, if it captures the total consciousness captured through all of that at all times, all kinds of lives, that is what can be called Brahman. Now that means it's the most spiritual totality that we are talking about. It's not your spirituality or my spirituality. It's the sum total of all spirituality. Now, at one hand, it's being said that is what is real, and the material is unreal. And then the next line is concluding saying is that life is Brahman. Life is that spirituality. So the spirituality is equating spirituality with life itself is the conclusion. And then the final word, na paraha. Na paraha means that is it. And come on, don't argue any further. That's it. Come on. That's the end of the story. Na paraha. That term represents a feel like that. Okay, that's end of the story. So, Jagat Mitha Brahma Satta Jivo Brahmaiva na paraha. Whenever we think of this, whenever we are talking of this, of these kind of the balance or the integration of material and spiritual, we need to keep these words in perspective. At KarmYogis for 21st Century in our Fit for Life program, we always do that. And this helps us. Why do we do this? Because this helps us to understand and to get the real insight about the integration of the good, the true, and the beautiful. I've talked about it earlier, and we will keep talking about it as we go on in each satsang, everywhere. But it's all about integrating the good and the true and the beautiful. It cannot be just because we cannot lie because we are trying to do some good for someone. We cannot take the recourse of untruth, that something that is not truthful, just assuming that we are doing it for the good of everyone. No. Integration of good, the true, and the beautiful. So Mangal or good of everyone has to include truth, has to include beauty. These three things coming together is what this sadhana paddhati is all about. And hence we are very careful not to bring in, not to use one versus the other, not to use mangalmay or goodness to kind of sneak in lies and untruth kind of things. And that's, in order to get to that point, it's very essential, it's very important to understand this whole issue of Brahman alone is real, the world is unreal, illusory, and yet life is Brahman. When you understand this cycle, this interplay of all these three, when you really get that insight and your life becomes an expression of this totality and not just Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. Then you kind of tend to put all the material stuff where the truth, the material stuff is where truth can be really judged carefully. Whether it's raining or not is material stuff. You cannot lie there. Whether I can jump the Indian Ocean from one side of the Indian Ocean and back up to the other side of the ocean onto another country, whether I can do that kind of a long jump or not, well, that is truth. That's the part of the material world. But in the spiritual world, in my poetic imagination, I can jump anywhere, I can go anywhere. That's a different world. And the rules, the ways, the rules that govern the spiritual dimension are not the rules that govern the material dimension. And hence it's very important not to kind of mix these up and then kind of confuse people for your own benefit. It's absolutely not allowed, not something that our sadhana paddhati encourages you to do. The sadhana paddhati that we are giving time here is basically to understand and to imbibe within us the quality, to integrate goodness, truth and beauty. So in order to do that, once again remember Jagat Mithya Brahma Satya, or you can put it as Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva na Paraha. The world is illusory, Brahman alone is real, Brahman is the world. That's the end of the story. Take it easy, friends, and take care. Namaskar.